Welcome to The Outsiders. You alright, Si?
You alright, Stu?
What are we here doing? What are we talking about?
Well, for those of you that are new to The Outsiders and those of you that have been here for our half-hour preview, so are effectively regulars, it's an inane conversation between two people that touches upon issues of football, that skirts issues of philosophy, and delves deeply into the inadequacies of both of us.
See, you had a problem saying the word inadequacy there, which highlights your utter inadequacy. And I know you as a man.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely inadequate as a man. So
I'll tell you what happened. I sort of had an existential crisis like midway through saying that word. As I realised I'm crouched here in my spare room, speaking into a microphone surrounded by cushions. I'm a thrifty man, Stu. You know that. You are a 16th century bourgeois duke. Could you describe your surroundings? Have you furloughed the house staff, or are they waiting hand and foot at the moment?
Furloughed the wife. No.
Good thing is she'll never listen to this.
No,
nobody who knows us does.
Things to do at a time. Yeah,
because we are genuinely ashamed of this, aren't we?
I listen. Yeah, I am. I don't know why we do it, other than just so when we're old we can say, when someone says, "Did you ever do anything creative when you were younger?" we can go, "No, nothing at all." Just
no, in fact, actually, we aggressively went the other way, because this is the opposite to creativity.
Sometimes what I do is maybe 1 or 2 days before we do a podcast, I'll start reading, and it might be a scientific paper, or I might just dig into a little bit of 17th century philosophy or something. And then what I do is I come back to that, what Fat Frank called it this week, confirmation bias. I talk to you, and then I gravitate towards the stupidity that just oozes out of every pore. And then I'm back to normal. I'm just reset. Because what I do is I get these crazy ideas where I think, I'll try and educate myself. I'll try and think a little bit wider. And then I just talk to you, and I'll go, right, okay, I like Mother's Pride. You know, I like cheddar cheese, just mild.
Yeah.
Is there a reality TV program on TV? I'll sit down and do that. And you know, just order just as much kind of like ethnic takeaway as I can, and then I fit nicely back into the archetype of basically what passes off as a human being in this country right now.
Yeah, you were a little bit worried there, weren't you, when you said the word ethnic? I could hear a slight tremor in your voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because, you know, I don't want to get...
It's a loaded...
I don't want to get chased down the road. I live in a nice area, and I don't want to get chased by the road, down the road by snowflakes with pitchforks.
Well, they would be your house staff, wouldn't they? But fortunately, you've got a stables, so it's a quick exit. You mentioned a name.
Snowflake. Yeah. The weather's been a bit weird, hasn't it?
I thought you, rather than talking about the weather, talking about snowflakes, I thought you were going to talk about our favourite manager.
Oh, yeah.
The affectionately named... Big Fatty Lampard. Poor Frank.
Fat Frank.
Poor Frank. Listen, he's had a bad week, hasn't he? Had a bit of a.
I think, you know what the worst bit of his week was, and I'll tell you what. I don't think he was getting fired. I think the worst bit of his week was when he got home. John Terry was at home making sure his wife was feeling okay.
All right, was it? Was he now?
That revelation might have been the real cutting part of the week. I mean, being sacked's one thing, but getting home to John Terry sat on your velvet sofa.
He must have been confused because he'd had 7 missed calls from Wayne Bridge.
Yeah. Hey, listen, this is cheap. This is cheap and nasty.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Fat Frank. Because obviously today, how do you say the geezer's name? Tuchel.
Thomas Tuchel.
Thomas Tuchel. There we go. You're a man of the world.
Now he's a manager with acumen, and I think look. From the tone of our discussion straight away, even if you're a diehard Chelsea fan, I hope you can forgive us that both you and I, for quite a long time, have struggled with Frank Lampard as a manager, and actually, I think for this year in particular, Premiership fans who, when he was at Derby, he was he's sort of dipping his toe in the water, a bit like we all know Steven Gerrard is managing a club, but we're not that bothered until he manages won in the Premiership. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like that. But I think Premiership fans in particular have seen he's a bit of a whiner, isn't he?
Yeah, I tell you one thing that has absolutely blown my mind is that I thought that there's only a select few people that really took a dislike to him. But apart from a hardcore of Chelsea fans, the vast majority of people are absolutely delighted that he's been sacked.
Yeah. Well, it was that for me. I thought it was that weird little spat that he had with the journalist. Only a few days before he got sacked.
Yeah.
But that was not out of character at all, was it? And there's this odd thing, isn't it, that we kind of want managers with passion, but there's a fine line between, psycho passion, which I would say Jose Mourinho has. He has his spats with journalists, but he's that sort of, it's don't make him angry, because he'll do that thing, where like certain people on a football pitch blank out, and it's like they'll hurt you till you're dead, and then they'll wake up covered in a skin suit that they've made of your skin and be like, what happened? I just blanked out. That's the sort of Jose Mourinho side of it, down to the sort of the whiny, I'm going to tell the teacher, which I felt the sort of the Frank Lampard side of things was. And there's all sorts of managers in between. But I think there's sort of two ends. You can sort of think, oh, Jose's back at it again. He's launched himself over the table at the journalist from The Guardian. Whereas Lampard, it was sad. And then when the fact that sad, but it really was, and it was a disappointing response, because actually you could sense the sort of the disbelief that the sort of the press pack had in terms of, it was just a genuine question, from sort of a middle of the road question that he obviously had a pre-prepared answer, but it got me thinking about
a pre-prepared
answer, yeah,
or as I like to call it, a prepared answer.
No. So you've misunderstood what I said there.
Okay.
He was prepared by his press secretary for the press conference, and they were like, Frank, here's what I need to tell you, Frank. You're not to have any spats with journalists, Frank. You see. He's a sort of, I think sort of 50s newsroom sort of style, New York. He's done well for himself. What Frank did is, before that preparation, he pre-prepared and decided that he was going to say something to that journalist.
Right. Okay. Got you.
Any journalist.
Clearing that up.
Yeah. And so, but actually, it got me thinking about managers and whether sacking a manager ever works.
Okay. All right, let's lead in with that with a little bit of music, shall we?
I've got a little stinger as well that we can do. Do you want me to do that before the music or after the music, Stu?
I don't know what the word stinger means.
I've got a little phrase that I'm quite proud of. I've spent literally a whole week coming up with this.
Do that after the music, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Sacking a manager. The good, the bad, and the You ruined it, mate.
God Almighty! You know what? Can I say something?
Yeah.
I have been listless since Frank got sacked. I've not been able to focus. As you can tell, I'm off it today. My usual punnery is out the window.
You've got no focus for your ire, have you? He's now even more irrelevant than he was.
I was on a podcast yesterday, Tilt Front podcast, with the chaps over there, and they said to me, "Do you feel what do you think about Chelsea, like the situation Chelsea's in right now?" And I said I felt I was sad. I wanted him to stay just so we could, definitely get more points on them.
Yeah,
I think Chelsea will be a threat this season now. I think they'll be organised, and I think they've got like 220 million quid's worth of players that are actually quite good.
Have now got an actual manager with acumen.
Someone who's going to tell them when you get the ball, run in that direction. Type thing.
One of.
Can I say something? Can I say something? Listen to this. I saw a quote today. It was incredible.
Hot off the press.
And the quote. Hey, hot off the press.
I've got to stop channeling this. I don't know where it's come from.
Yeah. This is incredible, right? Imagine how bad you got to be at this certain area of life for this to be real. The quote was this, from an inside source. that Frank Lampard didn't speak much to his players. He decided instead to speak through Jody Morris.
Oh.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine thinking, our half-witted, Cockney manager who played the game to a fairly decent level,
clearly got a brain
has
injury.
done nothing.
Yeah,
has done nothing in it since. He relies on his shadow as a player and a manager to say to us, go here, do that, kick this, feel that, twist this, suck that, whatever.
I'm enjoying the irony of you describing an inarticulate man inarticulately.
Yeah, that's what he's done to me.
Look, listen, Chelsea have got a fantastic squad. And you look at the players that are at Chelsea.
Remember the beginning of the season when you were choosing your fantasy team and you were going, obviously Timo Werner is going to be,
he's not suddenly a bad striker, is he? You've got to lay the door. You've got to lay the blame. Sorry, at Frank.
I would lay the door. I would lay the door on him, to be honest. Yeah. I would. No, I'd lay the door on him, and I'd say, listen, look at that door and feel its weight, and then when you've got that weight on you, lay the blame on that door. But the door's already on him. Yeah. I think with Frank,
it's raised the question. So my anticipation is suddenly Chelsea are going to become an extremely relevant force now. Whether the damage
do you think they will be immediately off the bat, or do you think it will be like
no, because
6th or 7th in the
if
table,
you look at,
and then next season they'll come out firing?
If you look at sort of quite a lot of sort of education theory, and I know you're like a pig in the mud when it comes to education theory.
I am like I'm like a rat up a drain pipe. You show me a bit of education theory, and I won't be able to.
Good.
No, I love it. Sometimes I go to bed and I just have it playing through some headphones into me, and then I wake up the next day and I'm in a
just
cold
screaming
sweat.
Piaget's name over and over again.
I just yeah.
So listen, the point I was going to be making was it's really hard to unlearn something. It takes time. If you've learnt something incorrectly, if you've learnt something,
that's why I never bothered learning.
I think that's clear. Inefficiently, it actually takes time to sort of break you back down and put in the correct foundations. Now,
are we making it more complicated than need be? We're talking about kicking a ball.
No. It is more complicated because we're at the top end of an elite sport here, and actually, I think what we'll see is that they'll suddenly become a bit more competitive, a bit less flaky. I think certain players we're never going to see again. Darlings of Franks, but I also think
who?
I think we could be seeing less, and Chelsea fans tell me I'm wrong, but I think we could be seeing less of Tammy Abraham.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mason Mount has and that's sad for England on the England front. I might be wrong, but you look at the riches at their disposal. I look at that squad, and it reminds me an awful lot. I saw I was watching the old FA Cup final, where Drogba scored that little flick over Van der Sar right at the end of the game, after Man U had been all over Chelsea. And I was looking at the names, and I was looking at that Chelsea team, and I thought, my word, they're strong. And then I look at this team, and I think, there's strength there. So I think ultimately, Tuchel.
I like Tuchel because it sounds like
I know what it sounds
like. Going to touch everything.
Yeah. You're a man of simple taste, aren't you? In a lot of ways. In that previous podcast, how do you feel about Frank Lampard leaving? I'm sad.
Well, yeah, okay.
I think they will become competitive in the short term, but they'll become extremely relevant in the long term. The big question mark for Chelsea is they're quite a way behind, obviously, in terms of the title race. But they could still be deciders in the title race, in terms of who they play against, who they take points off, here and there. I think you're going to see a sort of a rise in energy levels, but combined with a little bit more thinking. about
Can you
their play.
imagine if they start playing, like Dortmund or PSG, like crazy, man.
Yeah, and actually, they for me, there's no excuse with the riches at their disposal. So,
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Okay, listen, and this is difficult, and I don't know if you're going to be capable of doing this next thing. So just stick with me. Is 18 months enough time to make a team make a team come together and be cohesive? Like I keep being reminded of like Klopp and other people.
it took a while, didn't it, for Jurgen?
Is there a chance? Like I personally think that even with very minimal tactical kind of like nous, I think that if you get good enough players on the pitch and kind of make them G'd up, I think you'll do well.
Yeah, I think you can ruin a club in earlier than 18 months. I look at Bielsa, for example, for Leeds. He had an immediate impact. He basically took the same squad that finished 16th and got them to finish third. They famously fell apart against Derby in the playoff semis, but he got them to a place that they'd been nowhere near the seasons beforehand. So
that's kind of the opposite end of it, isn't it? It's not. It's no money, all G.
Yeah, and there comes a point where you can't say they've overachieved because he's had that impact. But then you don't really know. It's a different situation because Leeds didn't have any sort of superstars, whereas Chelsea do. I'm trying to think of examples though. Like if you look at West Brom, sacking Slavan Bilic. Slavan Bilic is a really good manager.
Yeah. Insanity. Absolute insanity.
Do you think that was the nail in the coffin for West Brom?
Definitely. And the reason I say that is because it's not like there were people queuing around the block to take charge that you thought were better calibre of manager. They went and got a retired building site manager. As far that's what it is, though, isn't it? And said, "Oh well, maybe he'll shore us up at the back." And it's like all the players must be. Imagine you're a player for that squad, right? And you got Slaven in there. You're right, mate. imagine you're playing that squad, and you're sitting around looking, and Slaven's in there. You know what kind of player he was, and it wasn't that long ago. And he's in there, and he's holding you by the shoulder, saying, "I believe in you. Get out there." And even if a few bad things go your way, that you had a really good season the season before, and he trusted you, and you went out, blah blah, the rest of it. And then seeing, like I say,
a slob, just sort of like a bit like
this shaven sea captain walking, kind of bellowing at the top of his lungs, like, "Go on, get out there, get stuff done. Like, don't let nothing through. Let's have a tight back foot." It's, oh God, it's like 1950s, 60s, 70s football, and they're lumping it up and they're getting absolutely battered off the pitch. Now they've given themselves a bit of a chance here, there, and everywhere, but it's like anything. If he was still there right now, I guarantee they'd have more points.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. And that's what I don't understand. If you got to the end of the season, and even if they did go down at the end of the season, right? Let's say they've been scrapping. They're not spending much money. They've got a sturdy team. They're a solid club. They would probably win by a canter next season, the Championship, and be back up and have that kind of progression of where the club's at. At this moment in time, for a fact there is a real danger of them doing a Forest or something like that. They go down this season, Allardyce will be out the door, and if he is, then you've got to break.
It's quite a sizable check.
Start the whole thing again. Yeah. You got to break.
You can't be angry at Allardyce, can you? Because he's doing what he does.
Why not? Yeah, but he shouldn't even. To be honest, he should be shamefaced. He shouldn't even put himself forward for work.
Well,
but. I know you're a fan of him, but
I think he was the wrong turn for West Brom.
He's yesterday's football.
Yeah, and I think
he should have retired years ago.
I think you look at. I think particularly if you go down into the Championship, you see just that merry-go-round of managers, and actually in the Championship, people seem to be willing to take a little bit more of a punt. Is it the equivalent of sacking a manager and getting someone in who doesn't have a huge amount of acumen? Is it the equivalent of going to a loan shark when you're in trouble? Do you think?
I think, it feels similar to that. My feeling is it's the thing is, it's just like any business, isn't it? Like if you got someone who is, it's like the sense is that not necessarily you're failing, but you're coasting. People tend not to. If you're being honest, like West Brom, for instance, they weren't magically failing. They were just actually coasting.
Yeah.
And they weren't getting better enough at a quick enough rate to kind of keep up with the Premiership. So what they did was they sacked a coasting manager. He wasn't failing. They were gradually getting better, just not at the right pace. And then they went and got someone to run their business who said, "Don't worry, I've done it before. I'll do it again." Type thing. Yeah. And then they've given him the checkbook and they've given him the time and the players and the rest of it. But he's just having a fag out back, and that's the business equivalent. He's having a fag out back, going, "It's all right. I get a car, everything paid
You know what,
for."
mate?
Type thing.
I've got chills. It's almost like Allardyce is in the room with us.
No, but you know what I'm saying, and you know I'm right, because the fact is that there's no. If you're looking for a dynamic club, you're looking for a club that's going to progress into the 2021. Moving forward, we've got a 5-year plan. We're going to build.
Allardyce isn't going to be plastered all over the sides of your stadium, is he?
Exactly. One thing, I know we spoke about Leicester last time, but how long has Rodgers been at Leicester? Since 2019. Yeah. So he's now 18 months down the line. Is that about right?
He's building very well.
But he's had a couple of wobbles, nothing massive, but he's had a couple of wobbles that have been completely forgiven. And I'm guessing that's because they believe in him. And maybe Slaven had a point at West Brom where he just thought people here don't believe in me. And so he pushed the envelope. And he was one of those kind of, he did it at West Ham, didn't he? Where he just kept pushing the people that run the place. And then they go, well, get out.
It struck me as a sort of quite an odd move. Do you think Fulham are gonna stick to Golden Boy?
You know what? People quite like him. People quite like Scott Parker. He's getting a lot.
Loved
of
him as a player.
Lately.
He could turn on a sixpence, that lad.
Are you pretending to be Sam Allardyce now?
You get me a man in the midfield. No, I'm back to the.
You'd be picking your ass up next week.
That's it. Yeah, I was back to the newspaper reporter. I want a man in the middle who can turn on a sixpence.
Scott Parker is getting a lot of respect lately in the media for the fact that he's changing Fulham and he's not playing the same. He's doing something different from, if I'm being honest, from what Leeds and West Brom have done. He's changed the way they play, and he knows they're not going to have possession. He knows they're not going to have much of the ball, so he basically is training them to say, when we have got the ball, we've got to make it count. And to be fair to him, like, something's happening. I thought he was a bit of a kind of like wide boy showman in the Championship, kind of like turned up, said his bit, left, and the rest of it. I'm starting to get a little bit of I think he's doing all right actually as it goes. I think he's doing all right.
Well, I mean,
I think there's a danger that Fulham might be okay if Burnley have a bad run. I think that Fulham are more likely than anyone to get out of that.
I mean, we've also got to talk about, they've got an inexplicable amount of points compared to the way they're playing. We've got to talk about Newcastle as well, who lost tonight against Leeds. Not a vintage game at all. Leeds were typical Leeds in terms of they could have scored 7, but also should have conceded 6 or 7 themselves. They got over the line. That they won 2-1. Yeah. Newcastle, they've got some good players. Shelvey, he looks like Lex Luthor and plays like Lord Voldemort, but he's got something about him. The Saint Maximin, he's a different level. He reminds me of he plays in the Premiership like Traore used to play in the Championship, just skipping past players and just having a confidence on the ball.
Can I say something? All teams included in what I'm about to say, Newcastle are still the only team in the Premiership where I have to remind myself who plays for them.
Yeah.
When I see them play, I go, ooh, oh, it's him. Oh, apart from the obvious ones, like you say, like like Shelby and the rest of it, I look around and I go, who's that? Oh, it's him. Okay, and they are a team of.
Yeah. When did they become that?
They've gone for youth.
Yeah. because Newcastle used to be.
I tell you what, watching the game tonight, it was like death by 1,000 cuts tonight. I tell you, watching Steve Bruce. I mean, I've never. He's been told he's sacked already. By the way, before tonight's match, I'm telling you that now. He's been told he's sacked because he has that face on him of.
I think.
He's kind of like David Brent in the final.
I think that's just his face, mate.
When he kind of goes, "Please, not now." No. The thing is, I got a lot of respect for Steve Bruce. I think he could be a decent manager. It's inexplicable as to why he isn't already. But he was a great player, and I think he has had his turn at clubs where you think, like it might be okay. Newcastle is a sunken ship, and he is trying to resurrect. And all that's happening is it's just sinking deeper in the sand with him standing on it. But he had that face on him tonight, where it's like, if we don't score, I'm going to get sacked on a loss as opposed to get sacked on a win or a draw, because I think he's sacked already. He had the face of a very tortured man, and I think it's pathetic. But I think Rafa Benitez will be in charge of Newcastle in the next week or two.
Stu's tips.
There's a prediction. You can take that. Yeah. You can take that. Yeah. And if you listen to this, you can put it in the bank. So you listen to that, you can shove it up your arse.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. You've sort of led me on to a question I have for you, really. And we're going to do this sort of probably not every week, but each week we're going to look at what defines a big club. And some weeks you're going to try to convince me about certain clubs,
I'm interested
and
in
some
that.
weeks I'm going to convince.
I've
got two that I want to throw your way. One that's a big club, and one that I think will never be a big club. And this is naturally controversial.
Before we get started,
you
tell me what you think what you mean by a big club.
Well, this is the question, isn't it? Because it's.
I think it's. Yeah.
I think it depends.
Talk to yourself a bit.
Welcome to the echo chamber. I'm your host. No, I think it's romanticism at its core, and so the definition of a big club speaks to your age, speaks to when you first fell in love with football properly. It speaks to the clubs that you just know have a certain caliber and quantity of fan. I don't think maybe that's sort of getting into sort of dodgy territory, but I don't think there's a scientific way of looking at it, and I think were you to try to apply a scientific way of looking into a big club, and this is one of the things that we'll talk about with some of our guests that come on later in the series. You can do that, but I think it takes away some of that sort of the mysticism around football. So for me, it's baseless conjecture that stems from my guts.
Okay, right, let me just set some parameters. So, what does the word big mean? I guess that might mean profitable.
No.
In which case... No, hang on, wait. If you think a big club is profitable and making big money, then they're the ones that are fairly obvious, like the top 2 or 3 in every league in Europe. They're big clubs.
Yeah.
If you think your definition of the word big is they've got this incredible history... and therefore some gravitas when talking about them, even if they're in League 2 now, for instance, but they've got this incredible history where for a decade or more they had in some way had an effect on
the football landscape.
Yeah. So, for instance, when Rangers were sent plummeting down to the bottom of the league, there's no way in which you would say they were a small club. They were still selling football shirts in China, for instance. So
I think of Deportivo La Coruña. These days, they're no longer the force that they were, but they were up there. They were the team that you didn't want to play in Europe.
Yeah.
But now it's sort of like.
So the first thing is about money making, okay, because that's the sport we live with now. The second one is about history. The third one I think is about pull, which are sometimes outside of those two. So. If players want to play for them, if managers want to manage them, and then like for instance, like Leicester don't really have a history, but I think you could argue they're a big club now because they're a pull.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that they're building a history, couldn't you? So are we seeing an establishment of a big club?
Yeah.
I think Leicester's a big debate for us to have. I don't think I'm ready to go toe to toe, cheek by jowl with you about Leicester. I'm
Cheek
not
to
there
cheek.
yet. That would be your preference.
Well, I guess the ultimate, if you want to talk about big club, might be an amalgamation of most profitable, best, like most prolific history, and the biggest draw. Which is why traditionally people see Manchester United as a big club. Manchester United could be on the verge of extinction. They could be in the Vauxhall Conference.
So they've travelled back in time.
They could be propping up the entire league system, and I still think people would want to play for them. I still think they would sell shirts outside of.
They'd have
Manchester
a named manager, wouldn't they?
Difficult. They'd have a manager. Yeah, exactly, and they would have surprising names being linked with them, even if they were out, nowhere.
Yeah.
That being so that might cast aspersions on a club like Nottingham Forest or Sheffield Wednesday, because they don't attract big name managers, they don't draw players, they're definitely not profitable, but they do have a history. So maybe there's a nostalgic element to it. And
I think you've missed something out. I think fan base has to play. And I know it's such a subjective thing, but and we all know what I'm talking about. There are certain clubs that have certain fans.
So we've just been slagging off Newcastle, but we can both understand completely that they have a very, very swollen fan base of really agitated, passionate fans.
Yeah, so a fan base that most chairmen, obviously not Newcastle's current chairman, but most chairmen would kill for. They'll buy the shirts. They'll attend the games, obviously, when there isn't a global pandemic.
They'll buy 2 shirts, one for their current weight and one for when they are obviously expanding. Yeah.
They'll buy 3 shirts. Yeah. One for their current weight, one for when they're expanding, and one to when they whip off and rip when they're angry in the stadium. Yeah.
They'll buy a 4th one to eat in front of the cameras when they turn around. Yeah, absolutely. That's who Newcastle are. Yeah.
So
it's quite an envious situation, actually. But it does make it. I think the same could be said for the likes of Nottingham Forest. I keep coming back to them. I'm not sure why, but I think their fan base is in the same ballpark as that, and yet they've had so many years of disappointment.
Yeah.
That they seem to have dampened.
Not even near misses. No. It's sort of, will Forest be inevitably in and around near the playoffs and then fade away? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it must be so frustrating as a Forest fan. So I think, are we both agreed? Are we both agreed that Newcastle are a big club?
I think there's one other thing that we're not thought about.
If you're from Sunderland or Middlesbrough, let us know.
The other thing as well is I'm going to get all arty-farty here. I think there's something quite kind of like dramatically Greek as well.
Ooh.
So what we're seeing right now in Newcastle is a real fall from grace.
Yeah.
A huge dolloping of hubris.
Yeah.
With an awful lot of pathos and there's a real tragic narrative arc that we all kind of lean into and go, oh my God, what's happening? And we kind of hope it doesn't happen. I'm saying that as a non-Newcastle fan, obviously. But I look on and I think to myself, I don't want them to beat my team, but I don't want... If Newcastle go into the relegation zone this season and have a relegation scrap, I will look on with a tiny, tiny tinge of embarrassment and sadness.
And is that actually the true failure of Newcastle? Because there's the horror of a big club going down and the sort of the seismic. It makes me think of you see those images of icebergs or ice shearing off, and you see the big wave that comes out. Yeah. You've got the horror of a big club flirting with relegation or administration or all those sorts of things, but almost being brought to a point of irrelevance and for other clubs to sort of other fans to look at you and be like, oh, that's a shame. But that's the strength of the response. I think is the ultimate sort of knife in the heart. To stay with the Greek sort of drama.
And just to add on to that, if you look at someone like Leeds United this season, and the fact that they went from being the most reviled club to being one of the most celebrated, despite patchy results, but there was a point in this season where people were saying Leeds are kind of one of the only teams that are worth watching.
Yeah.
That's a sign of greatness. That's a sign of size and about importance, because it's almost like the rediscovery of the club.
Yep.
You know, and so people are looking on and saying, they got their majesty back. They've got their image and their identity back. And as sad as we feel about, it's like Newcastle going into that kind of like nadir of their kind of like football in life in the 21st century. People are genuinely quite happy to kind of float along with the zenith of Leeds United at the minute. I mean, as soon as Leeds United get half decent and get 11 decent players on the pitch that are kind of like worth 30, 40 million quid each.
People hate them
again. Go back to, exactly. And maybe we've uncovered something different there. Maybe to be great, you have to be hated. Maybe to be a big club, you have to be hated.
So with that in mind, the Newcastle hierarchy are doing everything in their power to relegate Newcastle from being a big club to being just a large club.
Yeah.
So you used words like zenith and nadir, and I'm pretty sure in trying to delineate the difference between big and large, I've put them the wrong way round. I've always considered large to be bigger than big.
I think you've confused yourself with the word delineate as well.
It's on my toilet paper.
Let's go. Just go back to monosyllabic words.
Okay, so small club.
Good and bad.
A club that I admire, actually, in terms of what they've done, and in terms of the way they've used certain circumstances to increase their profile, to increase their infrastructure and improve their infrastructure. But I'm going to argue and say that Brighton can never be a big club.
Because?
Well, let's have a look at what you've suggested we look at. They've got zero history. I mean, unless you go back into the annals of time, they've not got a history. Most people alive today won't be remembering, that great Brighton team of the 80s. Do you remember when Brighton just dominated domestic football? They've not got that. What they've done is they've made quite a profitable business in some ways, and they've got a stadium that's now, no longer befitting League Two. They've got a proper Premiership stadium that was partly paid by the taxpayer, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But actually they're building a really competitive, really good Premiership side, and infrastructure, and it's impressive in terms of what they've done. And I don't know whether it's a little bit of traditionalism, and whether it's going back to that romanticism, whether it's new money, old money sort of argument and debate, whether there's an officer class and they're not part of it. But they feel like a club that's done good. And because of that, I feel like they can never, ever really get into that big club status. I don't see
we
fans...
might need to have this conversation again in 30 years.
Yeah, I mean,
if Brighton build a team in the next 5 years that challenge for the title, and then they go on a run of winning the title and the FA Cup, and
they won't, because Liverpool are going to buy Ben White.
Right. Okay. I've got a slightly different slant on this for you. Growing up, my brother's wife was from Madrid, and when we had some very, very torrid discussions about Real Madrid and all the rest of it, my brother always butted in and said, "Yeah, but they're just spending the king's money, aren't they?" In which we then turned into a discussion about how Real Madrid are basically funded by the monarchy in Spain.
Yeah.
Which is why they did the whole Galacticos nonsense.
Yeah.
So there is something else about being a big team. There's a corruption to it, and I think the modern equivalent is RB Leipzig.
Oh yeah.
People really, really, really don't like that.
No.
Because it's seen as like
these upstarts.
Conveyor belt. Yeah, but a conveyor belt kind of like business Moneyball thing going on that they churn out players, excel, they do that, and it's not about lads that come from Leipzig. It's not about lads that are come from the local area and done good. It's none of that.
No.
As was Real Madrid never was.
Is it hard-nosed capitalism? That actually hard-nosed capitalism means really that every so often you'll have the majority of clubs won't make it, but every so often there'll be a club that surprises everybody and establishes themselves.
Well, it's gone. It's the Man City paradigm now, isn't it? It's that sense of the Man City are almost like a different football club altogether from every other football club, even Manchester United and all the rest of it. They orbit in their own area of the football universe.
You can kind of see
whether it's their stadium, whether it's their players, whether it's their ability to. If they wanted to, they'd go and replace 6 of their players tomorrow with £80 million players, and it's. It's you might go, it's a fool's game because look what's happened with Chelsea, but actually Man City, on the whole, have done really well, and they've gone from a club who I remember when I was growing up, seeing Kevin Keegan taking over and trying to bring them through the divisions and thinking they're a bit of a joke from my youth, to be honest. And so there's more obviously billionaire clubs out there now.
Do you think that's part now of making it? It's like make yourself as attractive as possible to the rich man that's walking by.
I think that's what football's turned into. I think what football's turned into is if you've got a good youth system and you are loyal to your fan base, and I think that the money men behind it think that you're going down a blind alley. I think they go, what are you doing? I need you to sell shirts in China, and we need to make sure that this Saudi Arabian oil baron or this Russian oligarch are interested in buying us, so that we can have a 75,000 seat stadium that we don't fill, so we can sell more shirts, so that we can attract players who renege on contracts and whittle them down until the last year so we can get them half the price we should pay for them. I think that's exactly what it's turned into, and we're all doing it. The whole Premiership is doing it. They're trying to just play in between those cracks in the pavement where they think, how can we get that good player for not much, and how can we make it look like we've got all this money? And it's a joke, really.
You've gone maudlin again.
It's because I'm just, what does it mean to be big? If you've got a billionaire that buys you, you've made it. It's like, well, I prefer to see 21-year-old lads that come from 2.5 miles from the stadium, kicking on and doing well. I think that's when you know you're big. When you have the passion and the fan base and the city behind you, and to the point of where you've got young players that are coming in that want to stay loyal to your club. And sometimes I look at the Premiership in the past 20 years, and I think to myself, the players I've respected most are the ones that have stuck with one team and they've seen it through thick and thin, and they've had their ups and downs. And that's just what I think. A bit like
when you go back to when Bolton were at the top there, you had your Kevin Davises who you just all the way through. They were talismanic, weren't they? In some ways, and they were able to bring the superstars like Kocher and Campo and people like that into as well. And I mean, I think the rest of the team was actually called Davis. You mentioned something earlier on. You used the term Moneyball when you were talking about Leipzig, and it leads me on to our sort of pseudo philosophical exploration. Stu, do you want to cue in the music?
Well, I will do, but just before we do you mind if I give someone a shout out? Because shout out means when you say who they are.
Yeah, I mean, because
I know we don't usually do it.
No, because it's just you and me that listens to this, so
Well, all right.
Are you giving me a shout out?
There's a chap. There's a chap. Ironically, his name is Simon. Simon G. Smith, he goes by on Twitter. I don't know what his real name is. He might have a slightly classier name than that. I don't know. If it is Si or Simon, good luck to you, mate. But he's like a genuine intellect that tweets us fairly regularly. Yeah. I imagine him as this kind of wistful, kind of gentleman in somewhere around the mid-40s to mid-50s, ironically looking at his phone, tweeting and stuff like that, just pulling his glasses down and looking at it and going...
Doing it ironically,
yeah. And last week he pointed out, quite rightly, that we missed on the very obvious pun of when we were talking about razors, we're talking about Wilkinson's blade.
Do you mean Wilkinson's sword?
Wilkinson's sword, yeah. He said that.
So
right.
Yeah, so you got that wrong.
I got that.
What you've done is you've given Simon a shout out and you've misquoted him. Yeah, that's another listener gone.
So I imagine I was going to tap him up and say, if we just swap you out and swap him in, he's called Simon, so I could just say Simon, even though it would sound different. No one really cares. No one cares.
I'm on thin ice already as it is. I've been on notice from the start, haven't I?
Yeah, it's interesting you say thin ice. The weather's been a bit this week, hasn't it?
Smooth as a chin that's been shaved by a Wilkinson's blade, or whatever you called it.
So he I'm sorry, it was Wilkinson. Sword. Yeah. But he corrected like basically one of our puns, and he's a really clever, really funny guy. So, Simon, Mr. Smith, however if you're interested, Simon that I'm talking to right now, who sat right next to me, he's not.
No, because that's actually libelous.
Yeah,
and I'm not actually allowed within 20 feet of you by law.
No. If you want to come on and take the place of Simon and actually have a proper discussion about philosophy and be informed and knowledgeable, and I reckon me and you would get on really well. So so just this is a shout out, because that's what we do, because we're young and stuff.
Oh my word! Yeah. This is beginning to reek of desperation.
So Simon, if you're listening, I just want to say thanks, mate. All the best to you, mate. Thanks for the feedback. It's great to hear.
You've let yourself down big time there.
I'll give you a bell in the week.
Oh my word!
So, what were we saying? Philosophy.
Cue in the music.
Okay, cue the music.
Oh.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, I feel like I've just been touched up by a French duke.
Well, I've just been trotting the old two-step with Tarquin and Vaughan.
I feel like I've been molested in the barn by a stable boy in the 16th century. But
whatever. That's the key detail. That's the key detail.
Yeah. What's the philosophy today, Boo?
I'm interested. Oh my word! I'm interested in something that Malcolm Gladwell, who's he's a famous writer, journalist,
What did he write?
Podcaster. His podcast Revisionist History is a fantastic listen.
I've just finished reading The Tipping Point.
Oh, The Tipping Point, really good book. Fascinating, actually. And one of the things that he talks about in his podcast is something that just really stuck with me about the difference between strong link sports and weak link sports. And this is a theory that's not necessarily limited to sport. Mm-hmm. But he was looking at specifically basketball. Mm-hmm. And the philosophy really behind basketball is, which is a strong link sport, is if you invest all of your money and all of your resources into getting one really, really, really good player, top player, then you will achieve more because that player will make up for the deficiencies of the other four cheaper players who aren't as good. But he touched upon football. Unfortunately, he called it soccer.
Which is American for football.
For football, yeah.
Good. Just clear that up.
And he sort of said that football is, understandably, from his perspective, a weak link sport, where you will do better in football if, rather than investing a huge amount of money into one amazing superstar, what will happen is if you get rid of your Paul McShanes, for example, and replace them with a slightly stronger player, but not necessarily the superstar in that position, you will get better. And it got me thinking about the Galacticos. Got me thinking about capitalism. got me thinking about the current state of affairs, philosophically, that we find ourselves in the current state of football at the moment. It got me thinking about the difference between Chelsea and Leeds, for example. Chelsea, who have spent an inordinate amount of money and their wage bill is astronomical, to Leeds, who have spent a fair bit of money, but actually their wage bill is, I think, the second lowest in the entire Premiership.
Okay.
And this idea of strong link, weak link, and whether or not we agree with that, and whether or not we think that's whether we think there would be a chairman who would be bold enough, brave enough to fully embrace the weak link philosophy of, I'm not going to buy any superstars. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to incrementally improve all the weak positions with someone who's slightly stronger.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about that is how did you say it's basketball and football that were the comparison?
Yeah.
So is it just a numbers game? Like, because there's less people in basketball, one person makes more of a difference?
Yeah, exactly. And in basketball, there were multiple opportunities to score, for example. Like, you can score huge amounts in basketball. So you're going to have opportunity after opportunity. In football, there's every chance that you might have an XG of 1.4 in a whole game.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the tension lies between just accepting that football is a weak link versus a strong link, because the weak link understanding would be is it doesn't necessarily matter who your striker is as long as the rest of the team are fairly strong as well. But if you've got an XG of 1.4, then ideally you want a superstar striker, don't you? Who everybody wants because their efficiency is so high, because when they shoot on target, they generally score.
See, I would argue that exactly what you're saying now, because if you think about the most memorable players in the Premier League, for instance, they might not come across as superstar strikers, or superstar players. But I think about Andy Cole, like, he was nothing to write home about, but he was a goal scorer. So he wasn't weak. So he wasn't just part of the machinery. He had one very definite skill that they just kept relying on. It's interesting. I don't know how you would, but then there were people like Zidane. I mean, I think I'd rather have Zidane in my team than not, and he quite clearly is a superstar.
You'd rather have Zidane than Catamol.
Just about.
For me, it actually speaks to the wider state of things, because we've been talking about managers coming and going. You've got clubs like Watford, for example, who have traded upon the fact that their model is that you sack a manager and you get your new manager, you sack a manager. And it seemed to be sort of working and keeping them in the Premiership, and now it hasn't. Obviously, people are saying, oh, well, it was never going to work. But before that, Watford, had a fair old crack at staying up. But this sort of idea of hire and fire, the idea of pursuing that superstar. I want you to imagine now, Stu, that you are the chairman of South Norsbury Football Club.
Where's that?
It's just below North Norsbury.
Okay.
You have presided over some incredible investment tranches from overseas investors, but you're still the chairman. You've got yourself an amazing coach, and you've got some real homegrown players that have catapulted you into the Premiership.
This is North Norsbury, right?
South Norsbury.
Sorry.
North Norsbury.
What are those pricks over at North Norsbury?
They're swilling it around in League Two at the moment. Oh, they're playing against Bolton and Barrow and Harrogate. But you're in South Norsbury, and you're in the Premiership all of a sudden. You've got your TV money and it's come in.
Yeah.
You've got question marks over pretty much every position in your squad as to whether or not they're going to make that step up. Whether or not they're going to be able to show it. You've got some, 300 appearances for your club. 33-year-olds, do they still have the legs in midfield? You've got a right back that was with you from League Two all the way up, and each time he's taken a few games to adapt, but he's made it. But will this be his final opportunity? You've got some youth coming through that you just don't know. What do you do in that situation? Because for me, the attractive, the sort of the golden ticket thinking of the strong link game, to me seems like a much more attractive option for a chairman than the weak link. It would take guts, surely, more guts, to say, I'm just going to bring in a couple of, not necessarily journeymen, but some lesser names to ensure that my team is slightly stronger. What would you do in that situation as the chairman?
I would just take a trip over to North Norsbury, see what they're up to.
Urinate on their pitch.
Yep. Defecate, urinate.
Yep.
Smash my foot through both of them so it mixes all together in the centre circle.
So once you've done that, because that's called your thinking space, isn't it?
My inclination would be to, I believe in the mantra of a rising tide raises all boats. So I would start to replace the weakest as I saw, one by one. That's how I'd do it.
News just in. News just in. Boss. The current Spanish number 10 is available.
Are we playing some kind of...
I don't know where... I'm never doing that voice again, I've got to say. News just in.
Yes.
He's available. He likes the area. He's heard there's come some...
South Norsbury?
Yeah,
there's nothing there. We've got a Lidl.
You've got some gastropubs, mate.
Centre.
You've got some gastropubs around the corner.
Lidl and leisure centre, right? And then there's that dodgy street down near, southwest Norsbury where, let's face it, it's lined with, women of the night. So I don't know why Spanish number 10 want to come to Norsbury.
At
least of all, South Norsbury.
I've heard that there's a new restaurant called the Frog and the Tickle. You've had your eye on 5 players.
Yeah.
For across the board, they're going to strengthen your spine and bring you just that little bit of stardust you're hoping, but it's incremental increases. The Spanish number 10 is suddenly available, but it means you can only get him and one of these other players.
No. I won't go near it. Because no, I won't go near it. I would gently improve the weaknesses in the team, and I would become stoical with my
philosophy
coach and say, I would say, listen, I need us to be hard to beat. I'd be that guy.
See,
I would say let's try and grind it out.
I admire you for it, but I think there's quite a lot of thinking
track record of failure there.
Yeah, there is, and it's one of those things where you're on a hiding to a nothing as a newly promoted side, and any sort of side. If you don't strengthen enough with the big names, and if you fail, everyone says, "Well, you clearly didn't strengthen," and so you could look at Sheffield United this year, and actually it's a really easy and tired criticism to make is that they didn't strengthen enough, they didn't get enough of the big names in, whereas nobody was saying that last year. Because they were doing okay. Whereas, if you get some of the really big names in, Timo Werner, and they suddenly flop and don't score, it's, that was a big waste of money. You see where the difficulty is. Yeah. I don't think necessarily, I think the point that I'm coming to, and something that for us to consider, is that I don't think football necessarily is a weak link sport purely. Because if you think about the galvanising effect of bringing someone talismanic into your squad, who raises the quality, who raises the bar.
Like someone like what's that guy that played for Bolton? Kevin.
You don't get to say his
name. He like him, Kevin Davis.
Well, I actually think of Ibrahimovic. No, yeah. I go further than that. I think of. You'll need to cut it here. I'm really sorry because I've forgotten his name. Dutch striker. That's it. Okay, right. You ready? 3, 2. No, I go further. I think of Van Persie.
Yeah.
Van Persie won
right.
Man United that league title. He was a strong link signing. But the effect of taking the crown jewel from the opposing side, rival managers, rival clubs through the years, doing one over Arsenal, and actually seeing him fire that Man United squad, which was on the decline at that point anyway, into a league title, for me suggests that there is still space for strong link thinking. I wonder if that's already because the sort of the weakest areas of your squad are stronger than most of the strong areas of other squads. I don't know, but actually I think it's something that's interesting, and you see so many clubs chasing definitely the strong link model still. Got to get the name. Got to get Neymar. Got to get Messi. Got to get that that 18-year-old wonder kid. But what about that rising side?
With the rising financial side of football, I'm always suspicious of stuff like that. I never think they sign players for their ability to play. I think that's a happy coincidence. Because let's face it, if Manchester United had the opportunity, they'd sign Neymar tomorrow. Would they matter too much whether he won them games? I don't think so. It'd be nice. It'd mean that it would come, like the deal would come to fruition and it'd be the way it should be. But it's because they would sell more shirts, and so there's a different side to that. There's a different side to that altogether. Ibrahimovic is a good example of someone that actually, for a flagging Manchester United team, and for an aging Swedish striker, he looked like a superstar.
Yeah.
He was incredible. Messi's an interesting one. And so is Cristiano Ronaldo.
So let's
because they're the ultimate. They're the ultimate. Aren't
let's
they?
finish. Let's finish this section on Messi and Ronaldo.
Okay.
You're famously right in your predictions. You predicted the pandemic, didn't you? Back in 2016.
I did.
It was over. It was over a Cornish pasty. I remember you turned to me and said,
I did.
"Watch out for 2020."
Yeah. I what I did was listen. I ate the Cornish pasty traditionally.
Yep.
And left the spine of it.
You were in a mine.
I looked into the spine. Yeah.
Coal on your hands.
I looked into the spine. Yep. I looked into the spine of that pasty, and in many ways, I feel like that spine looked back at me. And I turned to you and I said, heed the pastry.
You put your big voice on as well,
is a bad
year.
Yeah. And then I threw the pastry down and then a bird ate it. And I thought to myself, that's 2020 all over, that is.
Yeah. I remember it.
If ever I've seen 2020 like manifested in some form of imagery, it was that bird eating the spine of that pasty right there and then. And I tell you, I didn't leave any potato or any meat. It was pure pastry, and that bird would have felt bloated that afternoon.
And
I thought that is 2020 all over. That is.
And in line with that predictive prowess.
Yeah.
Ronaldo and Messi have one more move in them. I think we're all. I don't see Ronaldo retiring at Juventus, and I don't see Messi. I think there's a cantankerous sort of relationship between him and Barcelona at the moment.
Yeah.
What is there? What do you think? Two questions before we finish. What do you think is the most likely move, and what do you think would feel like the most romantically sort of heartwarming move for them?
I think the most likely move is I think they'll both make. I think those questions are just one question actually. I think they'll both do what everybody would do in this situation. I think they'll shrink back to the clubs that they came from. I think that you will find that Messi will go back to Newell's Old Boys and spend a season there. And I think
coached by Marcelo Bielsa.
Most probably.
That would be lovely.
Yeah. And I think is it Sporting? That,
back to Portugal.
I think so. I think that will be the case because I think when you've had a career like theirs where they've just. One has stayed in one club forever and the other one has just gone and been a success. Everything he's touched has just turned to gold. I imagine the only one thing left is the nostalgia of where did I come from?
Yeah.
They're not interested in, signing, £5 million a week bloody things for Man City, and then they're not interested in it. That ship has sailed. They've got everything they need.
So your predictions are basically Newell's Old Boys and going back to Sporting. Yep. For me, I ate my pasty whole in that occasion, and I was bloated.
And it was too hot. And if you remember, when we were sat on that wall, you turned around to me and you had a mouthful of pasta. You did that thing where you'd taken a big mouthful and it was too hot and all the steam was coming out and you were basically going, I
think 2020.
I said to you, Si, what are you doing?
I was trying to predict that 2020 would be a year of success, and so famously, my predictions are wrong. I think Messi will end up at Man City. Or he'll end up at one of Man City's affiliates in the MLS. It's either America or Man City. Okay. I think Ronaldo... See, it's a tough one to know with Ronaldo. I would love to see... I would actually really love to see Ronaldo back at Man United.
I'd love to see him play next to Ake Fenwa. Oh, I think it would be brilliant at Wickham.
Wickham. Yeah, Messi. Yeah. Wouldn't you just love it if Messi was like, you know what, just sod it, I'm going to sign for Hibernian.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It's like lining
for 190 quid a week.
Lining up next to Mackenzie and Griffith, we've got Lionel Messi. He's whipped another ball in for them to head over the bar. Brilliant. He can't play on this pitch. The ball's bobbling all over the place. I think ultimately, Messi will. I love that idea of Messi going back to Newell's Old Boys. There's something poetic about that. I think he'll go to Man City or America. Man United. I would love to see Ronaldo back in the Premiership. I'd love to see both of them in the Premiership, just for at least one season. We know that they're...
How incredible would it be if one of them went to Spurs and the other one went to Everton? How incredible would that be? I'm not. There's no affiliation I have with Spurs Everton. I just don't want them to go to a top team.
Oh right.
It'd be nice if.
Cause I thought that was just fairly random. How amazing would it be if they went to Newcastle and West Brom?
Well, or like you remember when West Ham did all their business via the back of a van with big brown bags,
Tevez
and Mascherano and Tevez. Yeah. It'd be incredible to see imagine Messi turning up for West Ham and Ronaldo turning up for Southampton. That'd be incredible. It
would be incredible. I'd love to see them both in the Premiership, and they're not as the sort of the bright stars that they used to be. But I'm thinking strong. You know what? I'm thinking
35-yard.
I'm thinking strong link again. That strong link thing is pervasive all the way through. Look, Stu, we've been talking for over an hour now, and I'm actually angry with the people that are still listening to us. I don't know.
If you listen right to the end, can you just go, make a connection with somebody else, make a connection with a friend?
I think they've got to reevaluate certain life choices that they've made as well, because
make a connection with us.
No, don't, because
send things through the post.
No, because Stuart will then start giving you
anything
shout outs again, and he'll be begging. He'll be begging for some form of connection.
Simon, if you're listening, I'll catch you with you later, mate.
Well, we've got some exciting stuff coming up this week. So we're going to be talking
really
talking to some potential guests that are going to be on.
Not potential guests; they will be actual guests.
Yeah, they're going to be coming up in the next few weeks. So we better really smart on our act up, really, Stu, shouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. We can't.
Maybe you're right. Actually,
or knob gags.
Maybe you're right about getting this side guy in.
Yeah, I say we give him a shout. He sounds so much more switched on than you. Honestly, I think you'd really like him.
Well, on that bombshell.
Right, well, thank you for listening to the Outsiders podcast, talking about all things philosophy and all things football.
Neither of those things.
Stay safe, or don't.
No, do stay safe. Please do.
Yeah. But there's no meaning to life, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, actually, it's a joke, isn't it? And we're all sliding into oblivion.
Cheers, Si. Take care, mate.
All right, Stu. Have a good one.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, doesn't matter really, does it?
No. All right, no.
Cue the music or don't. You can't. No. I'm gonna jump in here.